Nobody within the Browns is under more pressure in 2026 than Deshaun Watson.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road right here at the Locked On Network and over at Browns Roundtable. And today's episode is brought to you by Odoo. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try it for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Deshaun Watson, Todd Monken, Jared Verse. Those are the three players or people within the Browns organization who face the most pressure in 2026. And I think we have to start with Deshaun Watson because nobody in the organization, frankly, is under more pressure than him. And I'm going to make arguments for the other two. I might even miss some people. There might be somebody that you don't hear his name mentioned and think, man, this guy's under a lot of pressure. Andrew Berry's not on this list of people I'm going to talk about. You might feel like he's under a lot of pressure. I get it. But to me, when you're a player in Deshaun Watson's situation, whose career is, quite frankly, in jeopardy, in doubt, nobody knows what the future holds for him beyond this last year of his contract with the Cleveland Browns, there's no bigger pressure than that. Like this competition that he's in with Shedeur Sanders and how he plays afterwards, if he wins that competition and starts the season as the starting quarterback, could realistically determine whether or not there's even a future for him in this league anymore. Like that's not hyperbole. That is just the cold hard truth. This is a guy who, in 2020, he was one of the best quarterbacks in football. And in the years leading up to that, he was trending in that direction and certainly in that conversation. And then the injuries happen, the off the field stuff happens, and he's now gone basically the last 5 years without playing consistent, meaningful football. There's been moments, we know the Ravens game in 2023. There's been a few others. There's been spurts, but it's largely been bad football, ugly football, terrible football. Use whatever adjective you want to use to describe it. It's been putrid. It's been riddled by injuries. And we can't definitively say that he's going to just be in the NFL next year and be a quarterback for some team. You maybe guess that he might end up a backup somewhere because he was too talented that some team might take a chance on him, potentially. But with all the stuff off the field that's kind of transpired over the years and that hanging over, like, is it worth it at this point? It was worth it at the time to the Browns because they thought he was a top 5 quarterback in football. But now that we've the last several years realized that might not be the case anymore, it's certainly not the case anymore. I don't know that teams are just going to willingly sign up for that. His future truly is in the NFL. His future in the NFL, his career is on the line as he competes for the starting job, as he gets ready to play this season. If he can't make it through the season, like, what does that say? If he can't win a competition at quarterback over a guy in his second year that ended up being drafted in the 5th round, like, what does that say? A guy that once was a top 5 quarterback can't beat out a guy that has some rawness in his game and needs some time to develop. And that's not a shot at Shedeur Sanders. A lot of quarterbacks that enter this league need time, need to grow and develop. And he certainly has made a lot of progress. I've highlighted on this show how much the coaching staff has talked about his progression and his footwork getting better and just the way he sees things getting better. So it says a lot about Shedeur if he comes and takes that job because he's improved that immensely and he's put in the work. But what does it say on the flip side of that about Deshaun if he can't beat out a second-year quarterback when he was once this one of the best in the game? Again, it probably means he doesn't belong here anymore. And so that's what's on the line for Deshaun Watson this year. And Todd Monken kept saying he wanted to have his quarterback named by the end of spring. And I think some of that came from the idea in his mind that Watson in the spring, especially when there was no pads and it was just kind of thrown against air, we all see the workout videos that Deshaun puts out, right? Where he's out there running around, throwing the football, and he looks like he's healthy and great. And you can get excited about that stuff. We've gotten excited about workout videos before with guys like Odell Beckham Jr., for example. Like, yeah, a lot of guys look good in those settings. And I think Todd Monken truly believed in his heart of hearts that Watson would just look like the better quarterback and really seize the opportunity in the spring when there's no hitting, when there's no pads, when it's not full speed all the time. And the fact that that didn't happen, I think speaks to Shedor's progress, yes, but also it's why he couldn't name a starter, because he realized maybe I was wrong about Deshaun. That's just my read on it. Not that he thinks he was totally wrong. Like Deshaun still has a chance to win the job. And as I've talked about, I think there's tangible reasons why he might still have a leg up going into training camp, because of his veteran presence and because of the athleticism piece that he just has over the other guys in this quarterback room, except for maybe Taylor Green. But we know he's way too raw to be a starter at this stage. Like, it never happened. Deshaun did not run away with it. And so he wasn't ready to make that decision. And Deshaun's kept that door open. Deshaun has a second-year quarterback breathing down his neck, and he's got to block out everything else. That he's got to block out the last 4 years and everything that's transpired here in Cleveland. He's got to block out the fans booing him everywhere he goes and nobody really wanting to see him here. And I know in his press conference he had, where he spoke for the first time in nearly, what did we do? Like, what was it? Like almost 2 years, right? Like since October before the injury, before he ruptured his Achilles against the Bengals. He spoke for the first time since then. He talked about being sort of having this new lease on life and this new perspective and blocking things out and all that. But listen, like Deshaun has said similar things before. Deshaun has said that the hate and the booing and all that stuff doesn't faze him, that it's not something that's on his mind, that he's taking this, like, I don't give a bleep attitude to seasons when he's been here in Cleveland. And it's still been noticeable that he still has picked up, or he still has been on social media blocking people, and he's still, you can tell it still is impacting him in certain ways. And I've always said, I think that's the biggest thing that he wasn't ready for. This is a guy that was universally, adored in this league and spoken very highly of. And for him to become this player that's maybe one of the most hated, if not the most hated in football for the off the field reasons, I think that weighed on him. I think that was a very hard mental barrier for him to break. And so he can sit there and say he doesn't hear all the fan noise and he doesn't care what fans feel. And, he's at a Cavs game earlier this year, and as he's leaving the arena, he got fans chanting at him Shedeur Sanders' name. He can say he blocks all that stuff out, that it doesn't impact him and all that stuff. But I until I see him be able to perform with all that going on around him, I don't buy that he doesn't hear it, and we haven't seen that yet. So he has to block the relationship with the fans out. He has to block the fact that there's, the weight of the contract that he signed and how he hasn't lived up to those expectations. He has to block out the fact that he's a free agent at the end of the season and might not have a future in this league. He has to block out the quarterback competition. He has to block out everything to go out and try to win this job and prove that he still belongs in this league. To me, there's simply nobody else on this roster here in Cleveland that has more to prove and more pressure on them than Deshaun Watson. Period. He's the answer. As we talk about pressure throughout this episode and who is feeling the most of it, the answer to top the list has to be Deshaun Watson, because we know everything that's transpired. We know everything that comes with the contract he got in the trade and the expectations and all that hasn't lived up to him, how he's viewed here in Cleveland, how the fans feel about him, all of it. He's in a competition with a second-year guy. If he can't beat that guy out, his career is truly on the line here, or at least the future of what his career looks like if he becomes a backup for the rest of his career. I guess that's that. But there's nobody facing more pressure than him. Now, there are others facing pressure, and the next guy isn't even a player. It's the coach. It's Todd Monken. Year one, he's under a lot of pressure, replacing Kevin Stefanski, who, yes, at the end it got bad, and it was probably time for him to go, but had more success than any Browns coach since the team returned in '99 in terms of getting the team to the playoffs. How much pressure does he face? We'll get into that coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing the software. The best organizations that they have success because it isn't about talent all the time. It's just about everybody working together towards the same goal quite often. And in Cleveland, for example, they just traded Myles Garrett back in June. That wasn't just some reactionary move as some thought it might be. The organization had a vision. They wanted Jared Verse back in the deal. They stuck to it, and Andrew Berry and his team got that trade done because everyone was working off the same playbook. Great organizations win because operations matter. That's why you should get Odoo. Try it for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. All right, so nobody's facing more pressure than Deshaun Watson. We got that conversation out of the way. But there are still others facing pressure. And in the conversation about the top three figures within the Browns organization facing the most pressure in 2026, Deshaun tops the list. But I do think Todd Monken is a close second. And I say this being the president, if you will, of the Todd Monken's not going to be a one-and-done coach club. I have been adamant about that. I just think, unless, again, and I keep using this line, unless it's Freddie Kitchens bad, like the operations week to week and game to game are Freddie Kitchens bad, I just don't think Todd Monken's going to get fired after 1 year when the team has really leaned into their identity as a team that is rebuilding and getting younger and trying to start sort of from the ground up. Does that make sense? Right? I just don't think, and by the way, I don't think the operations are going to be bad because we at least know he can do half of it. We've seen Todd Monken draw up some of the best offensive game plans in football with the Baltimore Ravens. It helps having talent, of course. It helps having a really good quarterback, of course, which the Ravens do in Lamar Jackson. But we've seen him do this at a high level. The other stuff that comes with being a coach, yes, he has to still figure that out. That's part of the reason why there's pressure on him for sure, because we don't know if he can do that yet. And he's a first-time head coach. He's going to have to do those things. There's a balancing act that has to go on. He can't just be in the offensive rooms anymore. He's got to be in there with the defense. He's got to talk to these guys. He's got to motivate everybody, not just the offensive guys, not just the guys he works with every day. It's everybody. You're now the head of it all. So yes, there's always a little bit of change that comes with that. But I do believe Todd Monken is not going to be a one-and-done coach, but that doesn't mean there's no pressure on him. Because like I said, when you're a first-time head coach, there's always pressure. When you're a first-time head coach, there's always a learning curve to improve the team and get better game to game from a standpoint of, like, again, being the head CEO of it all and knowing you got to make key decisions in game and that could cost you a win or a loss. That it's not just about the play calling anymore. It's about everything else. It's about motivating. It's about so much more than just the X's and O's on offense. So there's going to be pressure with that. I also don't think, to go along with the conversation of, you know, there's not this feeling for me that he's going to be a one and done coach. I don't think that there's like an arbitrary number of games that he has to win, even though, yes, you had Jimmy Haslam talk about the team should have been better last year. And so from that standpoint, I think there are some higher expectations that he probably had for them. And the roster is supposed to be improved, so I'm sure they do want to see you winning more wins than they did a year ago. Ultimately, though, I don't necessarily think he's going to be beholden to some crazy win total. I think if they win close to the same amount of games as a year ago, you can live with that because you're understand the team understands where they're at. And that's the thing. I have a hard time believing that anybody within the organization is going into this year thinking just like flatly, when you trade away the best player on the team, hey, we should win more games this year than we won last year. It's a young team. They finally lean into that. And until you have a quarterback, you're always going to sort of be on the lower end of the win total marks over at FanDuel. Like, you know what I mean? So I don't think he's going to be beholden to that either. And so from that standpoint, there's probably less pressure, which is why he's not like, I think they understand the assignment with Todd Monken is my point. I think they understand the type of team they have. It's young. It's a rebuilding roster that has a lot of youth to it and needs time. And so you therefore should be giving Todd Monken time. You would think, at least I would. And so I think they understand that, which means, again, there's a little less pressure on Todd Monken because I think they're going to try to give him some time to, do the things appropriate to build this thing out, establish culture, whatever. But that doesn't mean there's no pressure as a first-time head coach who's replacing a guy in Kevin Stefanski. And I know, again, it was bad at the end with Kevin Stefanski. He has to still ultimately prove that was the right decision to fire Kevin Stefanski. He has to come through and show, like, and I've talked about the things that make it a successful season beyond just wins. It's, hey, do the young guys continue to develop and grow? Do you see that progress on the field week over week? Is there a culture starting to be established? Like those are the things that are going to tell you if it's a successful season, but it still is, there's still going to be pressure with accomplishing those things because the last guy did a pretty good job, at least early on in his tenure, of doing some of those things. There was wins, there was growth, there was a culture starting to be established. And then it obviously went up in smoke the last couple of years. But there's a lot of pressure to perform here because for Monken, because so many coaches before him have failed. They just haven't. And you got to see the early signs that's on the horizon here for him. Again, he's also, and we've talked about this. This is the guy who was regarded with the 10 coaching hires that were made this offseason. He was at the bottom of the list. And so people aren't expecting much from him. That's an opportunity to prove a lot of people wrong. That's a lot of opportunity to, sort of put your money where your mouth is and showing that the Browns did make the right choice. And so there's some pressure from that standpoint because everyone's expecting you to fail and just be a one and done coach. What are you going to do about that? I think ultimately, while it's lesser than the Deshaun Watson pressure whose career is on the line, Todd Monken, if he doesn't pan out here, he'll have a job as an offensive coordinator within a year. Like that, he's too good of an offensive mind not to. It's not that level of pressure. But yes, being a first-time head coach who's never done some of these things before overall as in that role and be the CEO of the team, all of those things add to the well or the bucket here that he has to sort of overcome. And there's going to be pressure with it because you're now expected to take this team to a level that it just hasn't gotten to consistently, at least, since the team returned to 99. And there's a lot of pressure that comes with that, even if it's not all immediately in year one. But there is some in year one. And so for that reason, I think there is a lot of pressure on Todd Monken because everyone's expecting him to fail. And he has to go out and show, nope, I got this. I know what I'm doing. It's not going to be like Freddie Kitchens 2.0 or anything. I know how to game plan. I know how to motivate. I know how to lead. I know how to make the right in-game decisions and be able to have the success necessary to show that there's progress being made on the football field. That's the ideal sort of outcome here. I think he's equipped to do that, but certainly there's pressure on him to perform in year one. And so he makes this list as I think the person who has the second most pressure on them. If you wanted to argue Andrew Berry, who I don't have on my list because the third guy is the most recently added member of the Browns from a starting standpoint, I would understand that. I was going to choose two people in the front office or like in the leadership roles, right? With the organization, I was trying to do more players than that. But I actually think the pressure's kind of off right now because I'm not anticipating this draft class is going to completely flop. Maybe if it does, that would mean the pressure's really on. But the fact that he survived when Kevin's firing tells me he's going to get a chance to pick another quarterback. We kind of see where this ends for Andrew Berry. If he fails at picking or finding the next quarterback, that's where the pressure really ramps up for him. but he's going to get a chance to pick that guy. And so I don't know that he's having his feet held to the fire in 2026, unless, again, his draft class is just putrid. And I don't envision that happening. So I think there's less pressure from an executive or like the leaders of the team standpoint, the leaders of the organization standpoint. I think there's more pressure on Monken for sure than there is on Andrew Berry. And that's just my feeling on it. But the third person with the most pressure is a guy that was just acquired back in June. It's Jared Verse. And I think a lot of this stems from, this is sports. Fans, even though I've told you not to have unrealistic expectations for the guy, there's going to be plenty that have unrealistic expectations for the guy because of who he's replacing. We'll talk about it coming up on the Locked On Browns podcast. We talk about mental health more openly now, and this episode is sponsored by Betterhelp, but asking for help can still feel hard. Betterhelp's latest research confirms Betterhelp's 2026 State of Stigma Report Survey, 2,000 Americans, and revealed that 85% of Americans believe getting support is wise, yet 74% say society still discourages people from doing so. That disconnect is so interesting. Most people believe support is a good thing, but actually taking the steps can still be difficult. So it's worth asking, what helps make that conversation feel more normal and more encouraged? BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform with over 30,000 therapists globally, and has helped more than 6 million people connect with support. Through a short questionnaire, BetterHelp does the initial match so people can focus on their therapy goals. And if the match isn't right, users can switch to different therapists that are tailored to their recommendations at any time. If you're a sports fan, you've probably noticed more than ever, pro athletes that we see compete at the highest levels sometimes have underlying struggles of their own and just need to talk to someone. Changing that stigma around mental health is crucial in sports, or in our daily lives. Don't let the stigma stand in the way of support. Start therapy with BetterHelp. Sign up today and get 10% off BetterHelp at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. So while it could be disputed that there's others who have more pressure than some of the guys on this list, or you might have somebody in mind that I don't get to or mention, I'm making Jared Verse the person or the figure within the Browns organization that has the third most pressure on him going into the 2026 season. And I think this one's probably the most obvious of all. Maybe not. I mean, Deshaun Watson's pretty obvious. Like, his career really is in jeopardy here. First-time head coach is a pretty obvious answer as well. But I think this one is obvious where I'm going with this, because, like, he's going to be compared to Myles Garrett whether he wants to or not. Fair or unfair, that's just how these trades go. When you see a player involved in a trade of this magnitude, and it's the same thing. Like, I'll give you another example. Last year's draft, the Browns trade back, don't take Travis Hunter. They end up taking Mason Graham. Travis Hunter goes to the Jaguars. And people have said, we'll always look throughout their careers and compare what those two guys do. And I guess the early returns are, hey, Mason Graham was a really solid piece last year, played the whole season. Travis Hunter got hurt last year. And so can he stay healthy? Like, that's going to be part of the equation when it comes to whether or not he ends up being whoever maybe wins that trade, quote unquote, for those two players being drafted. Time will tell. Now, I know Travis Hunter's moving more so to being a defensive player that has an offensive package. Seems like the right way to maybe handle him. And maybe that helps him with longevity, and maybe he becomes the player that we all thought he could be in terms of being like one of those really good corners. We'll see. But those two players, for example, are linked to each other. And the same thing applies here. It's just the nature of the beast in sports that you have, these trades go down and people make moves, and the players that are involved are always going to kind of get matched against each other. The stats are going to get thrown up against each other in graphics to show, hey, here's what this guy's doing, and here's what this guy's doing. And this one wasn't like a straight up, because yes, the Browns got a bunch of picks in return as well. But when he's the only player involved in the trade for Myles Garrett going to the Rams, of course they're going to be measured against each other, and they play the same position. So whether he likes it or not, and he said all the right things, by the way, when he showed up. The whole line about, Myles might wear Nikes, but I wear Jordans and whatever, like the quote that he gave, I thought that was a perfect way to encapsulate like how people should view this trade and view him. He's a different person. He's not the same player. Myles Garrett is generational. Nobody should be trying to compare him to Jared Verse to Myles Garrett. But it's going to happen. And, you know, people are going to sit there and they're going into week 18 of the season, seeing highlights of Myles wreaking havoc for LA and downplaying versus impact and comparing their stats like, well, hey, Myles going into week 18 has 17 sacks and Jared Verse only has 9. Like, what's up with that? People are going to do that. And so it's unavoidable. I think for the most part, I want to be clear here too. For the most part, I think Browns fans are going to have level heads about Jared Verse and his impact and who he is as a player. He's more of a power guy, rushing the passer rather than the finesse that Myles Garrett brings. He's not the elite player and skills. He doesn't have the elite skill set that Myles does. All those things are obvious. And I think most Browns fans have accepted that, but still really like Jared Verse as a player, and he's got a really high ceiling that he's going to continue to grow into. And Browns fans, you get to be at the center of that. You get to watch that happen. But it's not going to stop some people from sitting there and measuring up the stats and saying, well, this isn't the same guy. I can't believe we traded for this guy. Why did we do this? Why did we give up on Myles? It's just the nature of the beast. Like, there's no rules in sports on how you fan in a way, right? We try to sort of litigate these things and police these things, but there's not, people get to do what they want to do. And so there's always going to be some people within any fan base who see a player get traded and are always just ready to look the other direction and say, well, look what this guy's doing. We do this all the time in Cleveland. It's happened a ton with Donovan Mitchell and comparing, especially with the postseason he had with the Cavs this year, which was probably one of his worst in terms of just some dud performances. Like, people are comparing, like, is he worth this amount of money? Should we trade him for this guy? And comparing numbers. We see with the Guardians all the time. Well, hey, the Guardians traded this prospect. Look what he's doing while this guy is floundering. It's part of the business of the fandom of sports. So it's unavoidable. And anytime you have a player who comes in and fills a sizable void, that it's going to come with pressure as well. Like, Myles is gone. He's got some big shoes to fill there. He's not trying to fill his shoes specifically, but it's so close to, you never want to be the guy after the guy, right? That's what we all said about Belichick's predecessor or Belichick's successor, excuse me. You didn't want to be the guy that followed Belichick. And the guy that followed Belichick got fired, and then they hired Mike Vrabel 1 year later. So it's just the narrative of these things. Because he's filling a void that massive, and because he's replacing one of the greatest players of all time, there's going to be a lot of pressure associated with that. Essentially, versus under a microscope. Every game, every snap, there will be expectations for him that may or may not be able to be achieved. Like, he may or may not be able to reach some of the things that people are going to bestow on him. And it's not going to be always fair, but that's just how it goes. I hope people keep those expectations more realistic, but when has anyone universally been reasonable about their sports teams and sports fandom, right? Like, it's just how it goes. You set expectations. And so I always like the line of, like, expectations can sometimes be the thief of joy, especially in sports. I think that's very true, but it's also just how it goes. It's what makes sports. We set expectations for teams. We set expectations for players. So he's got a lot of pressure on him to perform immediately. He's going to have a lot of pressure to get to a certain sack number, even if it's not the 23 that Myles Garrett had. Be impactful. This is another one in some of the most important moments of games, because how many times has that been something that was, put on Myles, right? When Myles wasn't showing up in key moments of games, all the people tweeting it simultaneously, where's Myles Garrett been? Why isn't he showing up? Where's the big plays and key moments? All those different things. That's just what Myles, and people had high expectations for Myles too, rightfully so, but the same can be said with Verse, right? Like, Verse is going to be held to a certain standard that he probably won't be able to achieve quite yet, or maybe ever, because he's not Myles Garrett. And that's going to come with a lot of pressure as he tries to replace him, fill that void, show up in key moments, get to a certain number in sacks, perform almost immediately. People are going to want to see it and see his impact on the field and know that it's there. So don't get it twisted. Jared Verse has a lot of pressure on him. I think those three figures, Deshaun Watson, Todd Monken, and Jared Verse, are probably the top three figures within the Browns organization with the most pressure on them going into the 2026 season. Did I miss anyone? Anybody else you would have included? And I already talked about Andrew Berry, but maybe you have a better argument for Andrew Berry as well. I'm willing to hear it. Hit me up at Spencito_. You can always jump in the comments section, of course, at the Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Also, if you're an Everydayer member and a part of the Everydayer Club, that members-only Discord channel is a really good place to chat about stuff like this, where you can get a hold of me, talk to other hosts around the network as well. Go to LockedOnBrowns.supercast.com if you're interested in the Everydayer Club as well. Don't forget about my friends at Locked On Cavs and Locked On Guardians as well. Thank you for being an Everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. That's going to do it for the 2 weeks of 3 shows a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Next week, I'm back to 5 shows a week. And we're going to start digging into this roster, previewing training camp, all that fun stuff. Very much looking forward to it. And I look forward to catching up with you next week, Cleveland.